Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sanko for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. And if you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. That is called The Pin Down. They bring you great Pistons insight and analysis as well. Obviously, everything over at Detroit Bad Boys, you guys should be reading. They gave me my start. I can never thank them enough for that. Also, quick plugs here. If you're not reading Omari on the Free Press, you absolutely should be. He's the best out there doing Pistons coverage right now. Also, shameless plug for myself. Listen, go read the Substack, Motor City Hoops Substack. I've a bunch of notes and analysis and all of that. I put the link. If you guys have not listened to, I got the opportunity to go on the Kevin O'Connor show and we talked 30 some minutes about the Pistons. So you can go and, watch that, listen to that. I put the link to that on the Substack. I think it's pretty good free content over there on the Motor City Hoops Substack. So check it out, subscribe. I'm on my way, trying to get to 500 subscribers by the end of the season. I guess the year just started, calendar year, but trying to get there.
Happy New Year, everybody, by the way.
Happy New Year, happy holidays, all of that different type of stuff, whatever you celebrate, however you celebrate it. Bobby Bucket says, morning, y'all. Good morning. Yes, very unique time to be recording the pod with the holidays and work schedules and stuff like this. This is just the way it worked out. Omari and I were in Denver together, but we kind of decided sometimes that ruins the vibes of the trip when we're worried about trying to record a pod. And so it was just kind of nice to be able to hang out, right, Omari?
Yeah, definitely cool to be able to hang out. It's just the logistics of recording in the same place, especially with such a quick turnaround. Bryce is driving in from Kansas. I stuck home for Christmas and then flew back out. And it's okay, well, when can we do it? Is the Wi-Fi going to be okay? And you have to have the right setup because you're operating out of a hotel room. And it's just it's a lot of hoops to jump through. So we'll do that again during Summer League, obviously. But it was nice to just be able to get together and just chat, catch up, and watch some hoops for sure.
Earl's Pud says, caught it live finally. Love the pod. Thanks for the great content. Thank you for the support. And day one listener, I pretty much never get to see the live stream over here in Sweden. So always cool to hear the different countries.
What time is it?
Yes. Let us know what time it is over in Sweden right now so that we know. It is not the same time. I promise you that, Omari. Based on my understanding of geography, it should be a little bit later in the day on Thursday, I think. If I had to guess, let's guess right now.
Later.
I'm going to say 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday, January 2nd.
I'm going to say 4 o'clock.
Yeah, because Dax Hoops just told you that it was 4 o'clock.
No, I swear I didn't see that. I swear.
So and then Muhammad says from Italy. So there we go. Italy is the one country I have traveled to. I went to Venice whenever I was right out of college. Vlad, who created Motor City Hoops, was playing overseas in Italy. So I got to fly over, watch him play a couple games and see Italy just a little bit. So 4:08 p.m. I'm American, by the way, been here for 22 years. Wow. Amazing. So Wes was guessing. You guys are liars. You guys did not guess that. Here's the other thing.
So when it comes to anything math, I always just...
You said it was different time in Brazil because you didn't know where it was.
I knew where Brazil was, but it's south. So it's a difference when you're just going straight from east to west. To now you have to account for north and south too.
You don't have to account for north and south when it comes to time zones.
See, but you're a teacher, so you should know that.
No, it's because here, you know why I know time zones? It's because I grew up in a time zone that was right next to another time zone.
Okay.
And I grew up having to convert it. So I grew up on Mountain Time Zone. Every other school in our league was Central Time Zone. So I always was having to convert. So I realized I grew up having to convert time zones, and people that don't really, really struggle with this concept of time zones. They really struggle. I'm not going to sell out my sister-in-law. I'll save that story. She'll kill me if I say it on the pod. So I'll leave it alone. Oh, real quick. This is how tired Omari was from this trip. So if you guys want an appreciation for players travel, beat writers travel, we go out to eat after the game in Denver. We go to this restaurant. We walk 7 miles to get to this restaurant. It wasn't that far. It was a nice walk. We go out to eat. We sit down. Omari's not going to order food. This waitress kindly says, she didn't say Omari, but offers Omari free French fries. Initially, he turns this sweet lady down, and then she gives him a second chance. He reluctantly accepts, And then guess what he does? He leaves before the French fries get there because he was so tired.
I tried. It was
free French fries for me.
You know, we got there at like 11:50. Well, it was like 11 something p.m. and the service was just slow. So it took us a while to get served, and then or even just waited on. And then once we got waited on, it was like we probably waited a good like half hour between the actual order. And by the time I left, the food still hadn't come out. So I didn't want these French fries to begin with, for one. Like I just was not in the I don't know. I don't
This is all erroneous. It did not take us that long. Omari was just tired, and rightfully so, because you had a 6 a.m. flight.
I have a 6 a.m. flight.
Now, that is your fault for scheduling a 6:30 a.m. flight, especially at the Denver airport that takes 30 minutes to get to and 2 hours to get through.
That's the Pistons' fault, because
blasphemy.
It got back at it got delayed like an hour, but it's supposed to get back at like 11:38, and the Pistons always practice at like noon or 1.
Oh, yeah.
So usually I take the first flight out so I can get back in time. Because if it were up to me, I would not have taken off at like 6 a.m. You know what? But sometimes I do like to wake up and just get out of the city and just get home immediately, because it's so early that your brain can even register the time passing. You know, like you land and it's like not too long after you would have waken up anyway. So it does vary. But yeah, long story short, I could be lukewarm or fries anyway, and it was like late, and it's like I'm not about to wait 45 minutes for some French fries I didn't want to begin with. I'm very happy she offered me French fries. That was very nice of her. That was very nice of her.
I definitely took advantage of those. So, all right, real quick. Brian says 10 p.m. in Indonesia. We have a comment we'll get to here in a little bit where the person also put what time it was where they were at, which I really appreciate. I think is awesome. Aruna says, I ran for a bus right after I moved to Denver. It took me 45 minutes to catch my breath. Amazing. Also, we had a fan say what's up as we were walking out the tunnel before the game. So always appreciate you guys. Thank you, especially when we see you in person. We enjoyed the interaction. I've had people comment that they don't love whenever we do too much of this conversation. So anything else we'll push to the end. We do have Pistons stuff to talk about. This team is 15-18. They went on this West Coast trip. They won 3 out of 4 games. Unfortunately, we saw the game that wasn't so great. It looked like they kind of lost their legs. They got a few days off. And honestly, plays pretty well against an Orlando Magic team that still is very good defensively. We may break that stuff down a little bit more later. But we're going to lead off with the unfortunate news surrounding the Pistons right now, and that is Jaden Ivey, the injury. Omari, I'm assuming you don't have anything. If you did, it would already be tweeted out, but I have to ask because I know our listeners are going to want to know and are asking what update, just lay out what happened for anybody who may not have seen it, what we know right now on just the injury to Jaden Ivey.
Yeah, so for those who missed it last night, in the fourth quarter, it was like 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Pistons were on defense, and it was live. It looked like a loose ball. Really, I think they were just trying to corral a rebound. But Cole Anthony essentially dived to the floor and undercut Jaden Ivey, knocked him right off of his feet, and couldn't see exactly what the injury was or exactly what part of his leg he was grabbing, which I think casts some uncertainty. But he immediately starts grabbing his leg. He's clearly in pain, his left leg. It's somewhere between the knee and the ankle is where it seemed like the pain was occurring from. And, his teammates ran over to get him, and Tim Hardaway Jr. motioned for a stretcher. And he was down for a while. Both teams were around him. Some of the players, seemed pretty emotional about it. So whatever the injury is, it certainly seemed like it was one of the more serious and just based on the reactions in real time. And even after the game, JB still seemed a little emotional about it. So we don't know what the injury is. Again, it happened last night. So typically there's always at least, 12 to 18 hour turnaround, at minimum on these types of injuries, because they have to go through tests and everything else. So, we'll probably know something before they play Charlotte at home on Friday. There's no practice on Thursday today, by the way. So we're not going to be able to talk to JB or get any updates at the arena today. So just an unfortunate situation, or really just sort of a freak live in the moment play. And we'll just have to wait and see what that means from an injury standpoint and beyond.
So Red Baron Arcade says, here to give props to you guys and talk some basketball, also holding my breath on Ivy right now. So I want to address what Muhammad says here. A sports doctor posted a vid on YouTube hypothesizing that it might be an ankle fracture. So I am no doctor. I have no understanding. I saw some of the same things, Muhammad. Omari, I don't know how much you've seen. I saw one guy say the same thing. I saw another guy who was just probably a high ankle sprain. Looks like the knee was saved. Doesn't look like an ankle dislocation or fracture. Worst case, which also is kind of best case, is maybe just a fracture of a lower leg bone, which I may be completely wrong here. I told my wife, like, I'm watching it last night. Randy's sitting there reading a book, and I was like, oh, look what happened to Jaden Ivey. This sucks. And like, we kind of watched it, and I was like, to me, it looked like a broken leg injury, which of all of the possibilities, to me, not being a doctor, seemed like the best case scenario, because an ankle dislocation seems really bad and what it can do as part of that dislocation. Obviously, anything with the knee, like ACL or something like that, is really bad. It wasn't like an Achilles tendon type of injury, right? Like those are usually non-contact type of things. I don't love it. We probably don't see him again this year if it's a broken leg, just based on where we're at in the season. But I walked away going, if it's a broken leg, I feel like he recovers fully from that, and we definitely see him like full speed at the start of next year. So I hate sitting here like trying to guess what it is. So this is the part that makes me wonder if it's something else. Don't usually see guys crying over their teammates getting ankle sprains. Would imagine something broke and look gruesome. That's where I'm like, man, maybe I'm underselling this. As Koo says, very tough situation. I'm like, maybe it was more, because there was some real reaction, emotional, and I love seeing that. Like, if you don't think these guys like build real relationships, look at Ausar's face after that. And anybody like crucifying Ausar in any way, like, can kick rocks. Like, that is real emotion for real, like, friendship and teammate and all of that. You could, I don't know, Omari, like, it looked like JB's eyes were even a little bit red in that moment. So I think more than anything, it speaks to how these men feel about their teammate in Jaden Ivey. I hope it doesn't speak as much to how serious and long-term the injury might be.
Yeah, Wes says he said the same thing to Jill last night too about Jaden Ivey's injury. So just from reporting on injuries over the years, and obviously, anybody who's played sports probably has a decent idea as well. But yeah, like, a clean fracture is preferable to any sort of ligament, anything. And I think the concern with any sort of ankle fracture is that, there's ligaments involved as well. So you talk about the nature of the injury, and just judging on the reactions, then seems like there was obviously some visual element to the injury that kind of triggered guys, and just sort of added to the scene. And they covered it up with a towel, so we never actually got a visual of what it looked like. And in the real time, even watching it slow, it was tough to tell exactly what got hurt. So you look at, like, you just look at some of the leg injuries guys have had over the years, like Paul George, like, he had a very, memorable leg break, where in real time, it was very clear what happened. Like, there was no question about that. And obviously he missed time, but, he came back and, he was as good as he had ever been once he did. So again, don't want to speculate too much. We still have to wait and see what details come out about the injury, but just from context clues, it does seem to be trending more in that direction.
And we'll talk about the long-term kind of, okay, what's the starting lineup look like? What do rotations look like? Any moves, anything like that? Like I said, who really knows for sure? And I think based on that, we can probably have conversations about what the rest of this year looks like. And hopefully it's not, more than that, but we'll see. And we can have those conversations when they come. I know one other thing that immediately came to my mind outside of like just what the injury was and the rotations was, okay, what do we do with the contract situation? Like, that's what sucks for this with Jaden Ivey, is all of a sudden now he's kind of in a contract year, and what happens with that contract?
Yeah. So I guess timing wise, you look at him becoming extension eligible this offseason, but they still have a year essentially before they have to reach any sort of actual deal, right? You could look at 2026, I guess, 25 now, as really being the real action time where, he enters restricted free agency, and then you're looking at either matching a deal on the market, or, maybe if, you want to offer, if you want to beat the market, you could do that, obviously. But it's not super uncommon for teams to make decisions on non-max guys in that fourth offseason rather than the third, unless you can lock a guy down on like a really team-friendly contract. So like there's never a good time to suffer this type of injury, but depending on how much time he misses, like you're still looking at him having, in like a healthy fourth season, hopefully, right? And, he could still pick up where he left off momentum wise and then position himself, going into a contract season. So like, we'll just have to see. Again, like there's never a good time for this type of injury, but, for it to happen now, I think if anything, it could just push that timeline back from this summer to next, which could have been the original plan anyway, honestly, just depending on, what Ivey wants contract-wise, what the front office wants. So in the grand scheme, it may not mean anything. We just really have to wait and see what the injury is and, and then obviously what that means for him going into year 4.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was my thing is we've talked a lot about how there's a lot of data we could collect the rest of this season from Jaden Ivey. What would that look like? It would let them know what they needed to do with him, what kind of other pieces they need to put around him. And it just never, we're not going to be able to see that now. It doesn't look like it. And it really stinks because like that might have been the best offensive performance we've seen from him, at least. There's probably another one someone can throw at me statistically that was better, but he was knocking down shots at such a confident rate that was really impressive to see. I love to see it. And so it was just like, oh man, we're going to miss out now. It looks like on 40, 50 game sample of what he could be. And that kind of helps drive the decisions moving forward. And so that's what's really frustrating. I hate to see any injury, but especially in a situation where a guy is kind of playing for that contract, kind of playing for the money. I remiss, like most Pistons fans probably don't know this name, but like Drew Smith, this just happened to Drew Smith as well for the Miami Heat. Like he was, by all reporting, was about to get a standard contract. A guy who's been on a two-way contract a lot of his career. He had torn his ACL. He's the one that stepped on like a piece of paper underneath the bench and tore his ACL last season. Got back for this season, and then all of a sudden like popped his Achilles a couple weeks ago. And then now he's not in position to obviously get that move to a standard contract. And not one-to-one with Ivey, but it's just like, man, if he had figured this out, I was looking up his catch and shoot numbers on Synergy during the game yesterday. It was incredible. Like, it's not just good, it's really good. Omari, like his catch and shoot numbers are really good. It looked confident. And if he was going to play this consistently the rest of the year, there was so much data that needed to be collected, not just for his contract, but also for this team and what they needed to make. And specifically for J.I., it just sucks if it does end up kind of hurting what kind of contract he could have negotiated as he enters this offseason. So that was the next thing that kind of came to my mind outside of this sucks. What is the injury? How long will he be out? All of that is for J.I. specifically was, man, what does this mean for him and that contract negotiation this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, for that injury to happen in that type of game where he was 5 of 6 from 3, and like we've talked about his 3-point shooting, but he's just improved so much this season. I think after last night's game, he's pretty close to 41% from 3 this season. And it's not just catch and shoot, right? Like he was stepping into him last night. Like you look at that 4-point play last week, like he's hit some really big threes, some really confident threes this season. And it just seems like he's made a really, substantial and like lasting improvement as a shooter. Even beyond that, like I think the reactions on the team just say, just how much Jaden Ivey means to this team. Like we talked about just his work ethic, how he sets that example every single day, like first one in, last one out, but also just a genuinely nice guy, all about his family, his kids, and, obviously somebody who's been really open about, his faith in God. So, I think all that kind of wraps into the emotional reactions you see as well, because it's not just the player, but, just about the person he's meant to the franchise as well.
So Red Baron Arcade says Ivey is mentally tough young man. Just look how he overcame last year's coaching obstacles. Like I will say, like he does seem like a guy that will attack whatever this is rehab wise, get back. Mr. Ray says, isn't it in the 90th percentile? That was the catch and shoot. I didn't put the percentiles from Synergy in my notes from last night. I did. It was over 45% before last night's game. So just a really good percentage on catch and shoot. We're going to go to short break. When we come back, Omari, we've had some questions about long-term, like his athleticism, but also bigger picture. What does this look like for the starting lineup? Koo even dropped in there like potential silver linings, like obviously not one for J.I. I've struggled to find one for him, but I think Koo's asking for the team in general. Is there anything that could come from this that maybe long-term benefits the team in some way? So we'll get into those type of conversations around this injury after this short break.
All right, we're back with segment 2. And I mean, there's a lot to, dissect, obviously, with the Jaden Ivey injury, like not just what it means for him, but, for the team in general. So where do you want to lead off with this, Bryce? Because I feel like there's like 5-6 different directions we could take it.
Yeah, there really is. Let's knock this one out from Robert, who said, how will the injury to J.I. impact his athleticism, his main credential? And then he said, Rob from Sacramento, 7 a.m.
I know West Coast time. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah. So my thing with this is, until we know what the injury actually is, I would hate to speculate, right? Like this obviously could be a concern, lower body injury to a player who really, his main superpower, we've said it since the day they drafted him, was this elite first step. So could it potentially impact that? Of course it could, depending on what the injury is. I feel like in 2024, unless it's just a crazy injury, we do see guys get back to their 100% self, especially young in their or early in their young careers. So I don't know that this is necessarily a worry for me based off what we're thinking this might be. Now, if it ends up being something more extensive, I mean, I'll wait for, I think it's Jeff Stotts on Twitter in Street Clothes. He seems to be the guy that you really want to go to because he has tracked these things. And lots of times he'll say, okay, how much they miss and maybe the way they come back from it. Right now, I'm not super worried about this specifically, Omari.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily worry about long-term impact until you get to like the ACL or obviously Achilles tier of injury. And even with ACLs now, like we've seen guys like come back and like, even if you're not 100, like you're like 95, like I think about Zach LaVine and some of the other guys who have come back and been fine, just in the last 7-8 years or so. So again, like it's kind of tough to tell based on the TV what the injury is. But if you're looking at something less than that, then, I think with the way guys have recovered today and modern medicine and everything, ideally he'll be 100% fine. So it's tough to say how it'll impact, obviously, just not knowing the injury. But if it's short of like any real ligament damage, then it bodes pretty well for him.
Yep. All right. So let's go to what Koo said here, and then this will like kind of drive some of the other stuff. Koo asks, will you guys discuss potential silver linings? So I think, let's maybe flip some things somewhat positive coming out of this. Who does this open up opportunities for? You can start with what you think the starting lineup. Let's just start there. I think that's going to be the easiest thing. What do we think happens to the starting lineup? That will then drive what happens in the second unit, potential signings, other guys into the rotation, the roles, all of that. I'll preface it with this, Omari. Jaden Ivey this year, second most points on the team at 17.6. Jaden Ivey this year, third most minutes on the team behind only Cade and Tobias. Jaden Ivey, second on the team in field goal attempts, fourth on three-point attempts, second in free throw attempts. There's a lot of production, a lot of usage. He's taken some of the tougher defensive matchups in the starting lineup at times. So there is a lot to replace without Jaden Ivey, especially for a team that is 15-18, right in that play-in situation. So first and foremost, Omari, not adding anybody to the roster right now, which I think will happen in some capacity moving forward before the deadline is about a month away. What would you do Friday night in terms of the starting lineup?
Yeah, so as you hit on, and also Ivy is second in 3-point percentage on this team.
Yeah.
So you look at his volume and his percentage, and you could argue after Beasley, like he's been their second best shooter, right? And Cade is like in that group as well, obviously. But Jaden Ivey does a lot of stuff that like no one player on the roster can completely replicate. Not that like a guy like that, like with any injury, you're never going to get the exact same thing as the guy you lost, obviously. But for this roster specifically, you're probably giving up something, just because, I think J.I. has brought a pretty unique blend of skills. So you could look at, like, I think if you're looking at just who starts in his place, to me, I would start Malik Beasley. I think his scoring punch off the bench has been really, really great. But with that, like, I think you need that spacing in the starting lineup. Like, I don't know if you could start Ron or Ausar. And, I could see you starting Ron or Ausar, honestly. But I think the thing with that is now your bench guards are Malik Beasley and Sasser. And that's just like a really small bench backcourt, right? So that's why I would start Beasley. And, I think Sasser, essentially by default being your backup point guard, you want more slides around him when he's on the floor. So I would go Beasley, but I think you could also make the argument for Ausar or Ron pretty capably.
Okay, I'll go outside the box here. And I'm not saying that I'm suggesting this, but let's say JB wants to take the approach we've seen NBA coaches do in the past, which usually this is a shorter term solution, not something like this, which seems to be long term. What about the idea of starting Marcus Sasser next to Cade Cunningham, leaving everybody else in the roles they're currently in, and giving Sasser, so like to Ku's point, what's a silver lining? Okay, well now we are forced in some ways, but now you are forced to see what Marcus Sasser has. You are forced to put him on the other team's best perimeter player and see if he can play this role that I think he's best suited in, which is playing off a bigger guard, Cade Cunningham, playing aggressively at the point of attack, trying to be disruptive and all of those things. And now you're playing almost exclusively off of Cade for catch and shoot opportunities. And then you leave Beasley's floor spacing in the second unit. You leave Ausar's potential playmaking in the second unit. Ku, you brought that up, that wanting to see him do that. I think this is a big opportunity for him with that. You leave Ron's potential ball handling and playmaking in the second unit. I don't know that I love this, but as Red Baron says here, let's guys who have thrives in their roles stay in their roles. So I don't know. He is small to the point here. Who would he guard? I don't know, but lots of times there are those matchups. Maybe it's a game-by-game thing. Maybe whenever you have a Steph Curry or a Kyrie or some Darius Garland to guard, you have Sasser in the lineup. When there isn't one of those guys, Omari, then maybe it does need to be Ausar. Maybe that's the play, kind of alternating between guys. I'm not completely out on this idea, though. I would have to workshop it a little bit more.
I think there's an argument there, especially just from the standpoint of like Sasser probably being in his best role next to a bigger guard that allows him to, be more aggressive on defense and, obviously, be able to attack gaps on offense, not be, the main focal point. I would say, I think with that, just given that Cade and Sass.
Atame Kabugala says that's a liney. I don't know about...
What's a liney? I don't know if that's a silver.
What's the opposite of silver? Give me the antonym to silver, and that's what we'll call this idea.
A tin lining.
A tin line. The tin lining is the Marcus Sasser in the start. Again, I don't know that I love it, Omari. It just was like, we have seen coaches do this where they put, they leave everybody else in the role and then they find a new guy to put, tin lining. So, all right. Sorry, go ahead.
I think the thing about that is that Cade and Sass are your most capable ball handlers, right? And I think starting them, you can still stagger the same way you did Ivy and Cade, but if it's one of those nights where, Sass is just getting attacked relentlessly and it's not quite working, or there's foul trouble or whatever else, like who becomes that other ball handler at that point? And I would almost just keep them separate, just not necessarily for like a flow standpoint, but like, if you don't have like a really like a third guard on the roster, I'm just more comfortable with the backup point guard coming off of the bench. And that's just from a rotation standpoint, I think I just feel more comfortable that way.
So I hear that. I think where I'm at is like, I still don't really consider Sasser a point guard, like in terms of being a primary creator. I think, so this is where I see, again, the lining, silver lining, tin lining, whatever we want to call it. This would be an opportunity to put Sasser in the role where I think Sasser can be the most successful. Now, would that play out the way I would like it to? Would it play out in wins? All of those things? I don't know. But I think it would give you a chance. If you're looking at opportunities to get information on guys, this is the best opportunity to get the information on Sasser. Wes brings up a very interesting point. Is Ron Holland the weird middle ground between Sasser and Ausar? Better offensive player than Ausar, but worse defender. Better defender than Sasser, but worse offensive player? Maybe. That would be interesting. I think what I would do right now if I'm JB, I think it would depend on matchups moving forward. And so I think that's what I would do is, okay, we do have a little guard on the opponent. Who do they play on Friday night?
Minnesota.
No,
they play Minnesota Saturday, Charlotte Friday. Okay, so I don't think LaMelo Ball is taking Sasser to the post. So do you put Sasser on LaMelo and see if he can do that? I mean, that's worth a shot, right? Like with LaMelo, it's just staying in front of him. Like on paper, that seems like the matchup that you would want Sasser to take.
So here's what I'll say, Ku. I actually don't think I'm saying don't put him in secondary playmaking reps. I think what I'm saying is leave him in the second unit to do that. So that's where I'm trying to get with this is, okay, you put Sasser in the starting unit. I don't think Sasser's an on-ball creator, so now Ausar can be that guy in the second. Again, I don't know that Pistons fans, it'll be interesting to see where Pistons fans' appetites change after this injury also. Like, is it now Ivey's out, so we're a little more okay with figuring things out, getting information, or do you want to make the decisions that are best suited to winning basketball games? Because I think those are very different conversations in terms of who you start, or even, let's touch on this real quick. We had people yelling at us earlier in the year about a backup point guard. Do they go make a move, right? Like, can someone confirm to me whether Dennis Smith Jr. is on a roster? Because I swear I looked at the Nets box score on ESPN, a reliable source, last night, and he was in the box score. But I went to Spot Track today, and he was still listed as a free agent and not on their list of contract.
Yeah, he's with the Wisconsin Herd, looks like.
Okay, so none of that makes sense.
No, not really.
Okay.
Let me see. But I don't, yeah, but that's I thought he was on like an actual roster though. So yeah, like I thought I saw news that he signed somewhere, but yeah, it says he's with the Wisconsin Herd.
So the other name that Brian brings up is Markelle Fultz. And I think why these names make more sense now, stop, Caleb. Don't bring that into this world. For our audio listeners, Caleb thinks the Pistons should sign Killian Hayes. Caleb, I'm putting that on you. No, I appreciate that. This might be the time because Fultz may actually sign now, right? Like, Fultz may look at this and go, hey, here's a chance for real minutes for me. The other thing is, can you survive for a couple weeks and then at the deadline, whenever you make whatever move you make, even if it's as the third team, maybe a little kicker of that is, hey, we need a veteran point guard sent in this deal where we're taking on bad money. So interesting from YouTube user Keith Smith says Fultz has a knee injury and isn't ready to play yet. Caleb says, no, please don't put that on me, LOL. So yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of conversations here for a starting lineup that has been relatively the same for 33 games outside of a few guys missing games.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a time to experiment too, right? Like, maybe you do look at it and say, we're going to start Sasser, because he could shoot, like he could do some point of attack defense. And then we just trust Ausar essentially as this team's third ball handler. Like, we know he has that capability. I think his handle, has had more flashes this season than I've seen last season. Trade for Kojo. Shout out to Kojo. I caught up with him a little bit before the game last night. Great dude. So yeah, I would be curious to see if Ausar could eventually grow into that role, right? If there's going to be some growing pains. Obviously, he's still getting back to, his normal rhythm after missing so much time. But I think that's an interesting point that Koo brings up, is just that, let's see if Ausar could do this, right? If he can do it, then that probably solves a lot of problems for you going forward outside of the scope of the injury.
Bobby Buckets brings up something. I don't think this roster needs more guys that can't shoot. Just play the young guys more. My appetite right now is to just play the roster as is. So this, I'm cool with it. So I want to do that. Koo brings up another, depending on seriousness of Ivey injury, I think they may discuss larger move than just backup point guard. That's also true depending on what that ends up being. So, Koo said K, Beasley, Ausar, Tobias, Duren as a starting lineup. So here you take Tim Hardaway Jr. out of the starting lineup. Also, maybe there you're getting his floor spacing in the second unit. You'd still have Holland, you'd have Stu, you'd have Sasser, you get Ausar in there as the point of attack defender. You still have this floor spacing with Beasley. So I think there's some real optionality here for JB, and I'm kind of really interested to see where he goes with this, Omari, because there's a lot of different paths he could take.
Yeah, there are a lot of paths he could take. And, just given that we've mostly seen the same starting lineup this season whenever guys have been healthy, it really does open a door, to experiment a bit, to, see if guys can, maybe stretch their legs a little bit, spread their wings a little bit. But I think also as a coach, there's this delicate balance of not wanting to over leverage a team that's still very much figuring things out, right? The Pistons have hit some momentum. They've won 4 or 5, obviously 3 straight on the road, and they're within 3 games of 500, approaching they've played 33 games. So, in a couple of weeks, we'll be halfway through the season. And this is on track to be a really good year for them. So that's probably some sort of philosophical debate for JB and the coaching staff, right? Is, do we want to shake things up too much when, guys are finding rhythms in the rows that they're doing now. I guess, how do you find that happy medium? Because you have to do something, obviously. Like, some guys are going to have to be a bit uncomfortable, but you can't make too many guys uncomfortable, I think is what I'm getting at. You still have to find some sort of stability and allow players to do what they've been doing.
Yeah, so Wes brings up, and this was similar to Q's starting lineup, does this open up the opportunity to make more changes? Do you start Ausar and Stuart Reed? Do you make a move to pull Tim Hardaway? So it is like, okay, we're forced to make a move in the starting lineup. Does that now open us up to making another move that maybe we were thinking about? Like, I know a lot of people already thought that Tim Hardaway Jr. shouldn't be in the starting lineup. But what I think is interesting with THJ, like, while he struggles defensively, he also draws a ton of offensive fouls. And it's not just charges. Like, he's almost drawn 30 offensive fouls, I think, according to B-Ball Reference. He had 2 in the first 3.5 minutes last night. And it was like, first it was an off-ball thing. Then he did draw a charge. The other thing I will say, and probably not going to be a lot of Jalen Duren conversation on this episode, I think he's played a little bit better. I thought he played okay on the West Coast trip. I thought he was solid last night. I think he's starting to play a little better. I wouldn't want to pull the plug on Duren now, where it seems like, even though it's baby steps, there is a little bit of improvement, Omari.
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely been a lot more solid over the last 2 weeks. And I just got to shout out his pick and roll chemistry with Cade. Like, it's real, and the thing is, like, we knew it was real. Like, it had always been there, but usually just like alley oops is like an alley oop, right? Like, to see them just noticeably get better, like Cade not even looking at Duren when he throws them and whatnot. Like, it's been fun to watch that connection, I think, get a lot stronger this season. I would guess Duren's, like, I will be curious to see how many players have had a higher percentage of their offense come off of dunks compared to Duren this season. And I don't know if you can look that up on NBA stats or what. Like, I'll check later. But that's been real. Like, it's been fun to see Cade start to throw like 1 or 2 like no-look lobs every single night.
Yeah. No, and it happens in transition a lot. And his eye manipulation in those is legit. I tried to highlight it in one of my Substack post-game notes and analysis. I think I either screenshotted the picture or showed the video where Cade's looking one direction and DeRozan actually takes a false, like, DeRozan steps backwards away from Duren because of where Cade is looking, and then it opens up that lob just a little bit more. So they have real chemistry with that. Before we go to break here, and then we can start to venture off to some other topics if we want, Omari. I know there's some questions about Ausar. In general, maybe important to talk about Ausar and even Ron because of this situation. Will J says, come on, guys, let's get those likes up. 96 in here, only 21 likes. So yes, please hit the like button. Thank you for everybody. This is one of our most engaging episodes live right now. Unfortunately, probably because of the JI injury, but we still appreciate you. Comment section has been awesome. You guys have gotten along and talked and provided some great insight. Let's get into maybe some more, like, what does this mean for Ausar? What does this mean for Ron Holland? Maybe what does it mean for some of the vets and the trade deadline when we come back from this short break?
All right, we're back into segment 3. Let's go ahead and dive into Ausar now.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's probably the player who will probably be in the spotlight,
Sure.
for this the most. Like, obviously, like, 5th overall pick last season, and we've seen those playmaking flashes. So, Bryce, I'm going to ask you this. Where are you right now on Ausar getting those primary ball handling reps? Like, you are the backup, like, we're starting Sasser, you are the backup point guard. Like, where is your comfortability with that?
So I'm ready for it.
Okay.
I want to see it. I don't know that there's going to be growing pains. That's how I'll frame this. Like, if we expect him to come in and fill this role and be great at it, I don't think that that's going to be the case. But because while there were some really good, as Bobby brings up, some really good decision-making last night, there was also some poor decision-making last night. I believe he had 5 turnovers in that game, not playing in the role that we're talking about right now. But I think for Ausar, I would love to see it. Yeah, Tweet House says it. Do it. It's good time to experiment. I have the appetite for this. I don't know that other people have as much as what I do, but I want to see it. So especially now, as opposed to bringing in Markelle Fultz or Kojo or whoever, unless it's a long-term answer, I would rather give those to Ausar, and whether you start Ausar, stagger him into the second unit like they were with Ivey, I'm here for it. I would love to see it. And I think him being on the ball is probably better than off the ball because, listen, Omari, there was a couple possessions last night where his inability to space the floor was a real issue. There was one where Cade drove the lane, kicked to Ausar in the corner, and the rotation player was able to play the one more passing lane because he knew Ausar wasn't going to shoot it, and it ended up in a turnover. There's another one where Cade had a mid-post isolation, and the lane was packed because Ausar was on the weak side. Putting the ball in his hands is very intriguing to me.
Yeah, and I think along with that, and this isn't just this season, this team has always had a tendency in like key moments to like allow their worst shooter on the floor to take like the open three and like settle for it. Orlando was on a 27 run in the third quarter and they had cut it to like 5. And the Pistons had like back-to-back possessions and with like missed Ausar threes from the corner, which is like that's not the shot he should be settling for right here. Like you have to create something better. But I think that's just an inherent issue you run into with playing Ausar off ball, right? Like you have to do something. And like, especially when he's on the floor, like with Ron or with Duran, like, like everybody can't be in the paint. So, you stick one or two guys at the corner. I think putting the ball in his hands kind of prevents some of that. I think it allows him to continue to flash the handle that I think has gotten better. Like if he could actually get some real dribble drive going or could even just lean on that mid-range jumper he tends to go to, like that's real growth. And he doesn't need to be like Chris Paul. Like he just needs to keep the offense moving, while Cade sits. And you could probably live with turnovers and some other stuff if everything else working out, right? Like with his defense, with his rebounding, obviously the playmaking aspect and what he gives you in transition. So I do like the idea of putting the ball in his hands and just letting him run a second unit.
I mean, in fairness, and I don't want to like crush somebody that's at a low moment, but like Jaden Ivey also had some really bad decisions last night. I mean, he was playing, when I said earlier it was one of his best offensive games, I should have clarified it was one of his best scoring games. I think he also had 5 turnovers and misthrows lobs and makes poor decisions. Like this team is going to be bad in turnovers, especially as Wes had on the outline. I don't know that we'll actually get to. I think they're playing the second fastest pace or third fastest pace or something like that over the last 5 or 6 games. The funny thing is they actually did have low turnovers in that stretch, but then last night we saw 20 plus. Like they're going to turn the ball over being young and like playing fast. I'm just okay with them trying this out. So there's our guy from Brazil. What's up? We already had this discussion earlier.
Yeah, we were just talking about you.
Yeah, we were talking about you. So Bobby Bucket says, yeah, he had a turnover, hustle back to force a steal a few seconds later. That's our experience right now. Yeah, like he's not going to give up on a play. You can guarantee that. So I see somebody else, which I've lost it now, but like using him creatively, I like that idea as well. In the short roll, those type of things, all of that. Like from Mr. Ray, pick and roll, DHO, low man roller stuff, great athleticism, awareness. Yes, but love you guys. We love you too. Appreciate the support always. So I'm cool with this. I think you can find. Here's the other thing, Omari. You know what this may do? I was going to make a Chiefs reference, but Lions fans aren't about that, so I'll stop. It may force JB to be a little more creative with his offensive stuff, or whoever the OC is for the Pistons, and saying like, okay, we kind of only have Cade here. We can't throw all of this on Sasser. Let's come up with some creative concepts whenever Cade's off the floor. We can't just run pick and roll and those type of things. And so what I don't want to see, shovel snow or snowblower.
Snowblower.
Hey, listen, I got a new snow shovel for Christmas from my mom. Shout out, Marva. Appreciate you, Mom. Love you. So Ben Johnson, listen, no, this isn't where I was going to. I don't think the comparison works the way I was going to say. What I was going to say is, no, I'll leave it alone because people don't want to hear about the Chiefs. Ben Johnson, great job. Every week I see Adam Schefter tweeting out Lions trick plays. Like it's big time stuff. Really cool. But maybe this forces them to be a little more creative with what they do and not just settle into like the ball screen stuff.
Yeah, this is one of those injuries that like kind of forces, like I don't want to say desperation, but you're going to have to throw some stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And if this is a developmental season, then you might as well just use this as a developmental opportunity, right? Like you could go get a Markelle Fultz or an Elfrid Payton and, just have the vet run things, or you could allow Marcus Sasser and Ausar Thompson and maybe even Ron Holland to get some reps that they would not have gotten otherwise, right? Like we remember Cade getting hurt during Ivey's rookie season, and we got a full, and Ivey will probably never handle the ball as much as he did that season. And you get those reps, because it was an opportunity created by injury. So if there's a silver lining, it's just the fact that the Pistons are not a contending team. Like, they are exceeding expectations, and now you have some wiggle room, right? Like, now you can experiment a bit, while still keeping your goals in front of you and giving opportunities to guys who may not have gotten it. So we'll be curious to see, like, how much they lean into it immediately, or if it's something they lean into as the season goes on. But it's definitely a chance for guys to get a shot and to prove that they can do some things that they haven't done yet.
Tweet House says, let's get some horns action, old school flex, LOL, not really. Yeah, no, NBA teams run flex action way more than I would have ever guessed. Like, you cannot turn on an NBA game and not see some flex action. The only day that I will not love Bryce is the Super Bowl when the Lions will win. Yeah, like, guys, I cannot tell you how stressed I was last year whenever both teams were in the conference championships because of how much I'm going to have to stay off Twitter during that time frame of win, lose, or draw in that situation. So you mentioned Ron Holland. Let's talk about him and maybe what this opens up for him. Caleb says, is it just me, or does Ron get tunnel vision when looking at the rim at times and miss open shooters? I know you talked about his lack of feel at times in pre-draft scouting. Is that what you meant? It is what I meant in the pre-draft scouting. I don't think Ron Holland is a selfish basketball player at all. I don't think he's selfish. I think at times he doesn't see shooters. I think at times he makes the wrong read. I think at times he has off-target passes, similar to, quite honestly, what Jaden Ivey struggles with at times. So I think this ends up being a great role for Ron, or not great role, a great situation for Ron Holland to see how he can expand his game and see what he is able to do in terms of scoring. Because as I mentioned earlier, Jaden Ivey is second on this team or third on this team in a lots of offensive categories. And I don't know that you can get anything more from Malik Omari than what we've already seen. I don't think you're getting a whole lot more from Tim Hardaway Jr. And Tobias is probably giving you, I think these vets are giving you about all you're going to get from them, or you're going to way overtax them. So it's going to be Ausar, Ron. We already talked the Marcus Sasser stuff earlier. So where are you at with Ron Holland and kind of what this could mean for him?
Yeah, I like what Wes said earlier, where maybe he's the weird middle ground between Ausar and Sasser. Like, he has shown more shooting upside, and I think overall just maybe a little bit more scoring feel than Ausar. I think Ron's kind of got like a natural handle and like just sort of a natural way to know how to move his feet, get downhill, slide into, some places. Like, he's done it enough to make me think that this is going to be a core aspect of its game. Not even to mention just the fact that in the G League, he got to the line a lot. Like, he's a downhill player. So, I think that could be an element that's actually pretty unique for the starting lineup, because, Ivy has a great first step. His finishing at the rim has not been quite where you would want it to be, for a guy with his athletic profile. Ron's been very efficient, in the last few weeks or so. And that's obviously in limited opportunity on low volume, but I think he has done and shown enough, for there to be some valid belief that you put him in the starting lineup, he could begin to show more as a scorer, maybe get more comfortable as a shooter. I don't know what you're going to get from him as a playmaker. He's a willing passer. Wes says he's also a score-first player. Yeah. And I think he's a willing passer, but when he's going down the hill, what he's going to try to do, essentially. But I do like the idea of Ron starting, especially if he can knock down 33% of his threes, which I still think he could do at some point this season.
Yeah, as you said, did we already know about the Ivy injury? Yeah, so anybody joining us late here, I know we have people pop in and out. We don't have the specifics on the Ivy injury. So the way we framed it throughout this episode, maybe I should have clarified this at a certain point, is we are assuming it's an extended injury in terms of he misses extended time this season. If it ends up being something way more severe than that, then we will have those conversations. We'll record another episode in the next 4 or 5 days. With this being on a Thursday, I don't know what the schedule is, but we're going to be recording again sometime early next week. And I would assume we have much more information where we can kind of discuss the long-term ramifications and what that may mean if there was something else that needs to be discussed in terms of that. Right now, we're kind of just discussing this as Ivy's probably out for the rest of the year, or at least an extended period of time. And what does that mean for this team moving forward? Address this real quick. Brad B. Malik Beasley needs to be extended. Yeah, I would love for Malik Beasley to be on this team moving forward. It's just going to come down to whether he kind of wants to be here or not, because the Pistons can't really as things stand right now. Having talked to I text Keith Smith about this. they can't really offer him anything more than what another team can that has the non-taxpayer MLE. Like, that's going to be the best the Pistons can offer him. And there will be other teams that can offer him that as well. So like this summer, and as Bobby says, it will be this summer. And so what this summer comes around, and Detroit is going to have to, I would assume they'll make him the offer, and then it'll come down, Omari, to what Malik Beasley wants to do with regards to that contract.
Yeah. So, just for some background, in the NBA, if a deal is less than 3 years, it can't be extended. So you have to be on a minimum of a 3-year contract to be extension eligible, essentially. So the Pistons will have to compete against the open market. And like, that's something we'll definitely get into as the season goes. But that's definitely going to be a big question this offseason is, to what extent will the Pistons be able to retain him? Because he's been such a key part for the team this season, obviously.
Yeah, and my understanding also is there are non-bird rights with him as well. If you have a player's bird rights, then you don't have to have cap space to that's why it has to be the non-taxpayer MLE to really get him to the number that they want, because the Pistons cap space situation isn't like what it was last summer, at least right now, right? Like it could change. There could be a move. Like if you traded Tobias Harris for a expiring deal, I don't think that's happening, but if you did, like then some things could change with that situation. But right now, it seems like they would have to use their non-taxpayer MLE to extend him, re-sign him this offseason. And again, there are going to be multiple other teams. Now, the point that Keith made to me is a lot of those teams like to keep their non-taxpayer MLE because they can now use it as a trade exception during the season. And so there may not be as many teams in the market as what it initially seems, but we'll see. I wanted to ask you this, Omari, because I've actually noticed it as well. This is a completely non-basketball question, but Muhammad says, do you know what Cade's scars are from?
Yeah, we actually asked them a few weeks ago because they've it looked pretty gnarly, of the year, and it's healed a lot, but it's still there. Yeah, he said he was just playing basketball and, he got swiped at with somebody
scratched the head. Wow.
Yeah, so I guess he was playing against Wolverine or something. I don't know. I'm like, what kind of nail? Did they sharpen their nails? It just looks, but that's what it was. He said he was just playing basketball and somebody got a good swipe at him.
Wow, those are intense. I noticed them as well, and I was like, okay, maybe they just always been there, and I don't know. And then it's funny because whenever I get to go to a game and before the game we get to sit right there on the sideline and watch and whatever, and obviously they kind of stood out there in person also. So last one here, and then we can talk a little bit about Denver here to close out the show, unless you have something else. Red Baron Arcade being sellers at the deadline because of this acquired. I think that's where this thing is headed with Trajan. I think they're going to use that cap space to bring in a contract to get some future draft capital. Obviously, we know this team still owes a first-round pick in the future, but I think that's where this is headed. Again, maybe as part of that equation, he finds a way to bring in a veteran point guard in that, trade. Otherwise, I don't think you go out and buy, especially now. I didn't want them to anyway. I definitely don't want them to now. I think Malik is the hardest equation in this, Omari, because of what we just talked about with the contract situation, and he's been awesome. I would assume Malik Beasley is probably top 3 in 6 man of the year. Peyton Pritchard is the obvious name that comes up as competition. Malik Monk is starting in Sacramento, so I don't know that he's going to be as much in that conversation. You obviously have the Timberwolves guys, but I feel like he's very much in that conversation and going to be a name that's highly talked about. So it will be interesting how that is handled at the deadline.
Yeah. So the Pistons obviously are the only team with cap space, and they have some real cap space heading into the deadline. And I think we talked about it last week or the week before, but if you're Trajan and you're looking at your asset chest, right? What are you lacking? You're lacking draft picks.
Yeah.
And you can fix that with cap space. You can use cap space and take on, other deals that teams attach, draft picks with to get off of. And, that's probably the most logical use, of that cap space, right? Obviously that depends on what the record is. And YouTube user mentions don't trade Beasley unless he tells you he won't come back.
I agree, but that conversation...
Which I agree with that too.
That conversation may happen though. You may be able to go to Malik and be like, hey, are you going to stay with us? And he may be like, I don't know, 50-50. And then you have to make that decision.
Yeah, so they definitely have some judgment calls coming up, but I think broadly, like you're probably going into this like, oh, that's you're like above 500, and it's like, oh, maybe like we're like good. More than likely, you go into the trade deadline with the expectation that you're going to go into the offseason with more assets because you spent your cap space essentially to acquire those assets. Which, yeah, like they're in a weird spot where they're like the one team that's been rebuilding for 4 years with like no draft picks to show for it. So that's probably going to be a priority on some level.
Real quick, Atomic says Paul Reed discussion maybe. Wes, can we put that in the notes for the next episode? I do want to touch on that, but I don't want to talk about it for 3 minutes because I think it can be a little bit longer than that. So good call on the Paul Reed conversation. I want to do its due justice if we do have that conversation. And I kind of want to talk about our Denver trip, Omari, if you're cool with it. We had some good food before the game. We went to Bowls and Bush and had a good meal.
Yeah. It was a spot that we went to for the first time.
Yeah.
But just like, I mean, honestly, just like, really good, like bar food, honestly, like nothing crazy. But you got what? It was like a dry aged burger. Like, yeah,
he made it sound way better than what it was. So the appetizers were legit. The appetizers were awesome. We had chips and guac and queso and some cheese fries that then Ranny actually made here at home once we got back from Denver. But I had like a how many ever month age or year aged hamburger with aged cheese. And so it wasn't quite as what I had hoped, but the appetizers were awesome. Those were really good.
Yeah. And I got fish and chips because somebody online were like, the fish and chips here are really good. And they were fantastic. Like they were really good fish and chips.
So if you guys follow us on Twitter or Blue Sky, I posted our 2 meals and I'm pretty sure I won, but very, very slim margin. I don't know how you win getting fish and chips. Like,
because, well, first of all, people didn't know what it was. People like somebody was like, you went and ordered chicken tenders. And I was like, no, that's not chicken. That's fish. And then they were like, then somebody was like, did Omar get fish sticks? And it's like, it's fish. It's not a fish stick. It's actual fish. Like, why would you look at a piece of fried fish and think it's a fish? Like, a stick is like this big. Like, it was this big hunk of like fish. So, I didn't think it would be so confusing that a fish and chips photo would just be so hard to decipher. But I feel like I got like a bad rap in that. Like, I feel like the poll was biased against me because like nobody knew what fish and chips was. So
I mean, we got kind of crushed for like eating like children, I guess, in some way anyway. So Bryce, did you let your food touch? I try everything not to. I have gotten better about not just eating one thing and then the next and then the next. Like I kind of intermix it, but I still not a fan when it touches.
Wait, but if you have like a burger and French fries, like that could touch, right?
No. Why
not? Like they're both like solid foods. Like there's no mix.
I don't want any of my stuff to touch.
So here's the thing, like we had greens, like collard greens on the crisp. Like, so I always put my greens like a bowl because I don't like the broth like getting all over my food. Like that bothers me, and that's more of a texture thing. Like I don't want my food soggy. But if it's just French fries, like solid potato, and then like solid bread, and there's no chance of any intermingling at all, like that's still like a no-go.
No, only if I want it to. Like foods are allowed to touch if I want it to. You know what what can ruin?
And sometimes it is for the best too. Like there are some foods where you just need it on the same fork.
Well, that's different than you're purposely doing it. It shouldn't touch. You know what ruins my Sunday? If I have scrambled eggs and we have waffles or pancakes and the syrup gets in my scrambled eggs. It ruins my entire day. It pisses me off so much.
I kind of like that. The syrup on the eggs, like, so syrup, I'm cool with syrup getting over everything. Like if syrup gets on the eggs, that's cool. If it gets on the bacon, that's cool. Like I have no issue with that. Because if it's maple syrup, especially maple syrup is amazing. Like I can put maple syrup in anything that's going to be good.
Okay, Elf. All right, Elf. Make sure you put it on your spaghetti.
That's a great movie, by the way.
Oh, I love it. It's an awesome movie.
All right, yeah, great movie.
The only other thing I want to say is I got a chance to meet Trajan. Shook his hand. You introduced me. Trajan was like he was somebody like I looked up to when I was a kid. And I told you this and you made fun of me because I wouldn't go talk to him. But you were like, I told you, I said, like when I was a kid and I used to play in the driveway and I would make my little NCAA tournament brackets and I played with Duke, I would always be Trajan, making game-winning shots and stuff like that. So this is one of the things that the podcast has allowed me to do that's really cool. And I always kind of try to remind myself, like, don't undervalue. Don't forget to appreciate these opportunities that you get. Trajan was awesome. After the game, whenever you were doing something else, I was standing in the hallway. He walked by. He walked over to me, somebody he had just met, whatever, shook my hand and was like, hey, nice to meet you, whatever, take care. I thought that was really, really cool. So obviously Trajan's been doing a nice job with the Pistons, but just as a person, as somebody, put in the comments, like that was really cool to see and be able to meet him. Breaking news before we go, like, thank goodness we had the Denver conversation here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This just came out from Shams. Jaden Ivey has sustained a broken fibula in his left leg. So yeah, broken fibula. That's a leg bone, I believe. Yes, that is a leg bone. Okay, so there we go.
The two in your lower leg are the fibula and tibula. So
yeah, so there we go. Yeah, broken leg. So like not good, obviously. Like I can't imagine that bodes well for him this season. And now I'm just waiting to see if the Pistons are going to send a PR release, which should be coming soon.
So going back to what I said at the beginning, I still think this is best case scenario long term for Jaden Ivey.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. I felt like a broken leg, assuming it's a clean break and all of that stuff, is the best scenario compared to what we talked about with like potential, displacements, like knee stuff, anything like that. QT says he's not coming back this season, though. I would agree. I never thought it was going to be like, oh, it's actually just a high ankle sprain. He'll be back in 6 weeks. My guess is like, the player's reaction was to like, if it like poked through the skin or was dangling, something like that. Like, I know those can be really gruesome to see. I still think this is probably the best case scenario for Jaden Ivey long term. Everything we discussed today, I think probably stands based on this, Omari, in terms of you don't see J.I. in a Pistons uniform again this season, would be my guess. But I'm sitting here right now reacting to this news thinking this is good news under the circumstances of what the news could be. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is better than some of the other things that could have happened.
Yeah. Like I said, like in that type of scenario, and just based on the reactions, it seemed like it was some sort of broken bone scenario. So that's tough. I mean, it's tough to see him coming back from a broken fibula for the next 4 months. But in the grand scheme, if you have to pick an injury, a leg injury, then you want a clean break, which ideally this was a clean break and there's nothing else involved that could lead to any setbacks. But I think with that, you could definitely look forward to him coming back. And if there's nothing else involved, making a good recovery once he does come back.
And the one thing I'll say is, yes, he does. Here's the biggest difference to me between this and like an ACL. He's out for 3 months. So he's back on the court in, just say 1st of April. Think how much time he has to get ready for the off season or for the season now. Like he could have a full off season of preparation and all of that coming into next year fully healthy, as opposed to say a player who had the same injury at the end of the season and then misses the entire offseason. Dax Hoops, I appreciate the confidence in the Pistons. I would not put my money on the Eastern Conference Finals this year. But I again, as it sits right now, not being a doctor, this seems like a good situation based on what we know, like best case scenario based on what we know. Out for a few months. Hopefully it's a clean break, all of that. Yeah, like I think this is probably the best we could have heard today. I just want to finish up my point real quick. Trajan, was awesome to meet him. I really enjoyed that. I appreciated him. And it was like meeting somebody that I looked up to whenever I was a kid. And then the other thing was I was standing in the hallway and Isaiah Stewart walked by and he came over and shook my hand and said, "What's up?" And that was pretty cool. I'm not around a lot, but it was just cool to be in those situations. Not that I've had a bunch of conversations with him or anything like that, but always cool. Rodney Magruder was my guy back when he was still on the Pistons. So I always enjoy and appreciate those opportunities, sitting around, getting to interact with people and all of that. So final thoughts, Omari, on Denver, on JI, or anything else before we let the people go and get to their Thursday?
No, I'm just glad the news came out before we wrapped up recording. That was convenient.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think that was everything. I think that was talked about everything in Denver. Yeah, we're good. We'll be back. I don't know what the schedule is for sure, but whether it's Sunday or Monday, Tuesday, depending on when the Pistons play, we'll be back, after those games. So another Pistons Pulse in the next 4 or 5 days for you guys. Otherwise, take it away, my guy.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Once again, happy New Year to everybody. And big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, and our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols. And we will talk to you all next week.